The first time you see a council meeting, you may have a hard time figuring out what's going on. But after you've seen a few, you realize that the aldermen often don't know either.
Mr. President, I make a request to go out of the regular order of business for the adoption of a resolution here of...
we have this resolution before us now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I would like to have the resolution you just read to be read after this one.
In many of Chicago's suburbs, concerned citizens who attend council meetings can get an agenda, a rough outline of what's coming up. Not in Chicago. The mayor's staff and his allies get a large packet that details what's supposed to happen and when, but it's not available to the public or, for that matter, to members of the opposition, who sometimes find themselves taken by surprise with a shift in the traditional order or a last-minute substitution of legislation. Mayor Sawyer's floor leader, Bert Nateras, insists the council's routines are easy to follow.
Basically, what happens is an ordinance is filed, it goes to a committee having jurisdiction over the ordinance. The chairman then calls a meeting of the committee. People come in and testify for, and then it's reported out. Some of the agendas do come out late, but all of the agendas are available at the various committee offices.
So finding out what's going on at a given council meeting is simple. You just visit the offices of each of the council's 28 committees to get their reports. Obviously not a system that encourages you to participate. What's the impact of all the chaos? That story tomorrow in part 2 of our series on the City Council's Rules of Disorder. I'm Charlie Meyerson.
She is truly a person who typifies the American spirit.
I would like him to read the resolution honoring Mr. and Mrs. Carl and Marguerite Stockholm.
And whereas Carl Stockholm, the proud son of Mr. and Mrs. Stockholm.
Could I have a little decorum in this great body, please?
And of course, I have special kind regards for my good friend Irv Kupcinet, who to me is one of the foremost journalists in the United States.
Most council meetings start late, and then aldermen often blow more than an hour posturing with commemorative resolutions like those you just heard. Last week's meeting took almost an hour and a half to get down to business. Alderman David Orr says the delays are frequent and costly.
Sometimes 30 or 40 commissioners, their staff, all of the clerk's office, all these departments, 1,001 complaints about departments and what doesn't get done. If they're in here, they can't be working.
But the council floor leader, Bert Nateras, says Chicagoans don't really care.
We used to have our meetings televised by Channel 11. And during the first 3 weeks, they had a great audience participation. Then they found out the audience was going to sleep, and they cut down the schedule to parts of the meeting, and then they even took it off.
University of Illinois political science professor Dick Simpson, an alderman under Mayors Daley and Bolandic, says the council could make things easier to follow.
Often the committee reports are not genuine and adequate, and those are not available to the public in advance. If the committees did a decent job of reporting back, you would simply know that the main substance of the meeting was going to be what's in the committee reports.
The committees often finish their work minutes before the council finally meets, meaning aldermen are asked to vote on legislation neither they nor their constituents have read. It happened at last week's meeting as the council considered a package of budget amendments approved late the night before. Alderman Edwin Eisendrath says the result was mass confusion.
There were a number of amendments to the amendments, which were in a chaotic order. Well, by the time we get through all that, everybody's saying, well, did I vote yes here or no there? And I'd be willing to bet you that not everybody knows how he or she voted in that council today on some very important budget stuff.
Eisendrath and others are working on a plan to improve the council's efficiency and its accountability. More on that tomorrow in part 3 of our report on the City Council's Rules of Disorder. I'm Charlie Meyerson. Acting Mayor Sawyer's floor leader, Bert Nateras, says concerned citizens have no problem tracking the council's business.
They have very accessible access to their alderman. Anybody that calls up an aldermanic office and the alderman doesn't give them any information about an ordinance, that alderman probably won't get elected next time.
But Alderman Edwin Eisendrath says the council itself can't track its own business, and he's introduced a plan to require a 3-day waiting period between the time a committee acts on legislation and the time the council votes on it.
After all, we just voted today on dozens of budget amendments that passed late last night in the Budget Committee. Many of us did not have time to look through all of those amendments. We should be able to take the time to see what we're voting on.
Eisendrath also wants a specific agenda for every council meeting, but his plan is stuck in committee, dead for now. The City Club of Chicago and several other civic groups are set to unveil within a few weeks a plan to pry open the council's confusing structure. Among them, the often-heard proposal to cut the number of council committees from 28, a national record, down to 9. And former Alderman Dick Simpson, now a U of I Chicago political science professor and City Club vice president, says the City Club will also call for the council to reveal more about what's happening in those committees.
Citizens can never know, first of all, when legislation is up. Legal requirements are satisfied if they tack a notice on the second floor bulletin board. And the notice does not have to contain any reasonable explanation of what's going to be on the committee agenda.
Simpson says the City Club will push the mayoral candidates to take a stand against the chaos in the council.
No one should be mayor of the city of Chicago if they do not have a positive program for the betterment through the city council. The city council is the biggest stumbling block to progress in Chicago at the moment.
For the moment, though, if you want to know what your alderman is up to in the council, the mayor's floor leader, Bert Natera, says you should ask your alderman. I'm Charlie Meyerson.